What's up, everybody? Welcome to Leadership Garage. We're committed to your personal and professional development. I'm Craig.
And I am Mike, and I want to wish everybody out there a happy Father's Day. What a great day.
Specifically to you.
Why just specifically to me?
Because it's coming from me.
Oh, well, you too.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yep.
And to all the fellas watching and
absolutely.
I called my mom. I called my mom today and wished her a happy Father's Day because, of course, my father passed, and so she's in two roles. So I just she thought that was funny that I called her.
Good for you.
So
you are the son of the day.
I know. I'm the best kid ever. So. Her favorite.
That's right. Her favorite. I am too.
Yeah.
Don't tell my brother.
You're twin.
That's right. All right. Well, we're back doing the Leadership Lap series.
Yes.
The last one was really good.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did too. It was a lot of fun. We don't do a lot of rehearsal with these. We do talk. We did talk for probably an hour or so, 45 minutes before we get in here. But really, this is just open dialogue, creative thought.
Yeah.
Maybe a little argumentative. We're going to play devil's advocate in some cases. And, it's really just to create the dialogue because these conversations are really important when we talk about leadership, followership, communications, all those things that we've talked about since we started this podcast.
So what are we talking about?
That's a good question, Mike. And I think this is going to resonate with everybody out there, especially our military family and friends. These are things that they've been talking about now for several years.
Yeah.
It's resilience versus self-care.
Right. That's a tough topic, whenever you go, hey, what are we going to talk about? And I threw that out there. And you're like, oh, okay. Because it's a tough topic.
Right. If I had, some kind of, audio graphic or audio, background, how would you like the applause?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, we should think about getting that.
That's a good idea. I know. Right. Or, ooh, the golf kind of thing.
Right. Right. We should get that.
We should. Maybe I'll put it in there. If it's in there, folks, you're welcome.
Right. But it's an important topic, and it's a hard topic because even in our little discussion that we had before this, we were, struggling to come to bring things around. So, but let's just start, let's start.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
Why don't you, let's start with the definition, the Webster's definition of resilience. It's important because as you'll see, the very last couple words are really important.
So it says resilience is the ability to adapt well in the face of adversity, such as when you may be experiencing personal or family issues, a serious health concern or stress, money worries, or other challenges. One of the key ways to build resilience is to focus on self-care.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's interesting. And in our conversation prior to this, one of the questions that I asked you was, do we think resilience is an innate characteristic? In other words, you're born with it to some degree, kind of like some people have a physical, characteristic. They're better in that skill set. Some people might be more intellectual or intelligent. Or is it something that we can grow, or is it both? Right. Yeah. And then I asked the same question about self-care because, back to prehistoric times, we all are to some degree of self-preservation. I mean, that's a normal human trait. Right? But I mean, real self-care is not just that kind of fight or flight, thing that we all have, but an actual deliberate action that you take, every single day to help you cope.
To help yourself. Yeah.
To help you cope.
Yeah. And, and you think about it, and when you asked that question, I immediately said, well, I think it's also environment because here I was a latchkey kid, I remember being in second grade, coming home, having to fix myself something to eat. And but then the self-preservation came in whenever I was scared one time in second grade, hid behind the door and fell asleep. And then everybody was looking for me and they couldn't find me. Right. But the resilience part, it was, to me, I was like, well, I'm resilient because of my environment.
Yeah.
But like you said, was I born there? But with those innate abilities to be able to be resilient. And then we started talking about our kids.
Yeah.
Remember? And I was talking about I said, my kid is, may not be as resilient as I am because I shielded him from the things that I had to go through, Right. And so I think it's a little bit of both in the environment and how we are raised and those type of things.
I absolutely agree. I think the environment plays a big role in this. And, we've had this conversation before where you wonder why some of the most successful people had some of the worst upbringing, right? because they grow through those challenges, right? And they don't want that to be the rest of their life or their children's lives, right? And so they have this real longing and urging to be better and do better. But it's so funny because, we've seen examples where you could have two people that grow up in the same exact household and have very similar circumstances, and one of them ends up being very successful and the other one, ends up in prison or whatever the case may be. And so it does make you wonder if it's not just, you have this innate characteristic, you're born with this skill,
right?
That allows you to kind of deal with this. You have a certain level of resilience, and some people don't.
Right. And it's maybe how you react to the resilience issue, if something happened to you, how did you deal with it? Like I went to 16 schools in 12 years, had to move around a lot. How did I, is that something that because I was in that environment or because I did that, I ended up becoming resilient? Yeah. But I think we were talking too, though. I think that everybody has their moments that, because, I went through a pretty bitter divorce. It devastated me for a time period, so then I'm like, man, I didn't have any resilience. It felt like during that time period, and I didn't self-care,
right.
And so did that not self-care, help with the lack of resilience, or was it just because it was a different type of issue that I was dealing with?
Self-care too, I think it's such a new thing, right? When we were young, this wasn't a topic. It just wasn't, right? We talked about taking care of yourself, right, but in a way different context, right? And it's more of a safety, security kind of blanket than it was, hey, you need 8 hours of sleep and you got to exercise and, you got to let your mind, relax. And so you're in your A game kind of thing. It wasn't really in that perspective. We really didn't talk about that too much, right? That was more of the psychology, the professional psychology kind of realm. And really, we only talked about that when you had significant clinical kind of diagnosis.
Right.
But in the day-to-day, we just didn't talk about it. So the self-care thing, even though it's in the Webster's dictionary, it'd be interesting to see when that actually, changed. When did self-care become in the definition of resilience?
Yeah.
I would wager to bet you it wasn't that long ago.
Right. It couldn't have been that long ago.
Right.
I would say maybe within the 2000s, somewhere in there. But back when we were kids, self-care for us was my parents telling me, hey, did you shower this week? Did you brush your teeth?
Right.
Those type of things. But now, like you said, it's been, it's a part of our world because of the things that we're going through. We're going through some rough times. We just came out of the pandemic and we're starting to come back and people, a lot of people didn't handle the pandemic well. Even my kid didn't handle the pandemic very well. And so you kind of, so a bunch of these questions have been brought up, not just the military, but also in civilian world and civilian companies, people weren't reacting to the situation in a way that would be considered healthy or resilient.
Right.
And so that's, I think, why we're kind of bringing this topic up. We're kind of
talking about it. Yeah, absolutely. Because this is obviously such a hot topic, both of them.
Right.
It was interesting. I was doing searching online just this afternoon, right before we met, about any studies that I could find on, innate resilience versus learned, resilience. And it's very interesting, some of the things that they point out, and I'll read this to you. I hate to read. Sorry, I apologize, but I didn't memorize all this. But it says, there's a common set of characteristics that predispose children, and really we could take children out of this. We'll use it in the context of the discussion, but predispose children to positive outcomes in the face of adversity. And it lists 4 different things. The availability of at least one stable, caring, and supportive relationship. In this case with an adult caregiver, but again, if we're talking about, adults, maybe it's just the availability of at least one stable, caring, and supportive relationship. The second thing is a sense of mastery over life circumstances. And this is one of those things where you either have it or you don't. And whether it's an innate characteristics, you were born with some kind of level of it, or through experience, wisdom, age, right? You just gain those things over time, right? I'm not sure that it can be anything else. And maybe, let's talk through it. Maybe it can be, but maybe it's not. The third thing is a strong executive function and self-regulation skills. This is huge, right?
That one's the big one.
It really is. We talk about emotional intelligence, and I think it falls right in that statement, right? Strong executive function and self-regulation skills is massive. And I think a lot of that is innate, but a lot of that is learned too, right? Yeah. All of us are born with probably, poor executive function and self-regulation skills. Think about our young kids, right?
Yeah.
And the hissy fit they threw in the floor in the grocery store, right?
Right.
And then the last, and I think, if I'm being honest, I think something we're really missing in society and culture in general is the supportive context of affirming faith or cultural traditions.
Right. Yeah. Well, I believe, faith is an important issue. For me, it's really kind of the over consuming issue for me.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that's going to help me out no matter what. And I know that there's other faiths and there's other ways of dealing with that, or other areas of that for other different people. And it's always a comfort, It really is. If you, I would assume, I think we looked it up, with dealing with folks with faith and people who have nothing to lean on, who have no cultural traditions, because cultural traditions are even dying out.
Yeah, because of the internet, really. Yeah. It's so deep. There's so many things. We try to connect with things, and there's always some adversarial relationship with the thing we're trying to connect with.
Right.
Whereas 30 years ago, we didn't necessarily have that. You could connect yourself with it. And even though there was that adversarial relationship somewhere, but you didn't see it.
Right.
Once you connected with it, you could connect with it.
Right.
And there wasn't something always pushing against you, no matter what you wanted to connect with. There wasn't always some kind of adversarial relationship with it. But I really do believe, and we're not, pushing religion here, because we understand everybody's different. And we've talked about this in the Air Force. We talked about a faith, right? Having some faith in something, right? Even if it's just a belief that things are going to be okay, right? Even if it's not a higher being or power. But I really believe that's a missing piece. And if you think about all of these things, right? If you were really good, if you had a really strong, caring, supporting relationships, if you had a sense of mastery over your life and circumstances, you had strong executive function, self-regulation skills, and you had affirming belief or, in a higher power or some kind of culture or traditions, man, I have to believe that your resilience is going to be extremely high. Right.
But we also need to bring up the case, and I think we need to talk about it. We looked it up. It's 1 in 4.
Yeah.
Have a legitimate mental health diagnosis.
Yeah, clinical mental health diagnosis.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a medical aspect of it that we're not talking about. If if someone has a mental health issue, they have to have mental health and actual medical help and care.
Yes, I agree.
And so that's not the folks we're discussing.
And it's not 25% that have it for their entire life. It's within that year. That's actually what the statistic tells us, is 1 in 4 will have a clinical mental health diagnosis in the year. Right. So it may be me this year, it might be you next year.
Yeah.
But it's still, it's interesting that 25% of our society has this clinical diagnosis. Whether or not some of this is related to, resiliency and self-care skills and all that, so who knows? Right. It's really hard. We'd probably have to dig into some real research to figure out if that's the case or not, but it's the reality.
Right. And it's important that if you don't have those areas that we were discussing and your resilience, you're not being able to bounce back, you might want to go and find.
Oh, you should. Absolutely.
Go and talk to somebody.
Well, I think that's the beauty of this whole self-care conversation, right? That's what it encourages, is people to get help when they need help, right? And using it as a preventative measure, so getting sleep, exercise,
eat right.
Yeah,
I don't eat.
We're working on it. all those things, but also if you're really in a bad place, that you have, you can go get help. There's no stigma or anything attached to that. You just go get help. That's what self-care is so you're not afraid to do it.
Well, I got another question. So do you think that somebody can only be resilient, or somebody can only be self-care? Will they be able to survive life and be happy and productive citizens?
Yeah, man, this is a tough one. And I'm going to I'll be honest. As we talked about this before we came on, I get a little bit emotional about one side of this, one side of the spectrum. And there's a reason why. It's because I care, right? I care about people. It's not because I'm not empathetic to their, whatever it is that they're going through. Right. And that's the whole imbalance of self-care versus resilience. Right. I think both ways. I think if you can be overly resilient and you don't self-care, and eventually most people are going to burn out.
Right.
Eventually.
Yeah.
And I think honestly, Mikey, you and I are probably great examples of that. You as a first sergeant and myself as a first sergeant, every single day, I had one weekend off in a 52-week period as a first sergeant at one point. At the end of that, I was totally wasted. Yeah. I mean, you just completely burn out, right? But my duty performance was never impacted. I don't think it impacted my family. I just figured out how to deal with that. But at some point, it just ends up in burnout, right? It's really difficult to just be resilient and not sleep, not, eat right, not exercise.
Right.
Some people can do that for long periods of time. Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And some people are really good at it. And some people don't need a lot of self-care.
Yeah.
They don't need, if they can get 7 hours of sleep, because their cup is filled with whatever it is that they're doing, right? Yeah. Their cup is filled. That is their resilience. That's their self-care, because they do what they love and it fills them up and they get good sleep and they just rinse and repeat, right? And so they don't need a bunch of other things. You have a whole list of self-care things, right? They don't need a lot of it.
Right.
And so, but on the other end of the spectrum, I sympathize with this, with people, they just going through a lot of stress and times, and they just have to, you have to eat. They have to eat right and sleep and get a lot of exercise and meditate, right? They got to self-care. And that keeps them healthy, right? And I think the danger in that one is, and we talked about this, and I've seen it a lot actually, is that, those same people have goals and dreams and aspirations and, things that they want to do with their life, and whether it's personally or professionally. But when you in this like constant self-care phase, it requires time. You have to focus on you. You're focused on yourself and being well and taking care of yourself. Well, that time that you take to yourself that you need to be healthy takes away from those goals and aspirations and dreams sometimes, right? There's a balance. There has to be a balance. If you go too much to one side, then you give up on those. And what happens is you feel better in the moment because you're taking care of yourself, but then you don't accomplish the goal.
Right.
You don't reach that aspiration. You don't, recognize your dreams, and then you're down on yourself because you didn't do those things. Then you self-care more to make yourself feel better. And then another one, right? And you just end up in kind of this circle. And then, sometimes some of those people that didn't have all of those challenges that you did, and some of those are completely out of your control, right? Just zoom right by and end up accomplishing their goals and dreams. And they put it on Facebook, and then you see it, and then you get more depressed that you didn't reach it, and just, what I'm saying? So I think it's both ends of the spectrum. If you're on either end of the spectrum, absolutely. Right. I think there's a balance, or you just have to recognize
when you need to, and when you,
that's right.
Right. Because I know that, I think we talked about this, again, because I feel that in most people's lives, a lot of folks we can see, and they go through life and things are fine, but sometimes, and I would say more often than not, people having a crisis issues, people, whether it's death in the family, or divorce, or lost your job, or something happens, there's that, you just get punched in the gut. Mm-hmm. And you do need to take time to self-care and build that resilience back up. And I talk about mine with the divorce. There was a few month period that I was punched in the gut. Yeah. I mean, my resilience was nothing, and I wasn't self-caring, because I didn't know what to do. I had never experienced this like that. And so, so that was a critical time. And I think that we got to be recognized, as other folks, you kind of got to recognize that in folks. You kind of got to look, and that's where you can step in and kind of reach in and help folks get through things. But I think bystanders need to be active in that, and there was a combat controller that stepped in, and I'll never forget, he just hugged me and he said, everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And that really was what I needed at that time. So I think that's important. But to get back to my story, here's this catastrophic time. And then I also remember when I started to go out of it, I joined this thing. I was like, I don't like living the way I'm living.
Right.
And I went to the YMCA. It was called Morning Madness, and so I joined this YMCA, and I'm in with this group of people, and it was Morning Madness because it was insane workouts, and so doing that, those workouts kind of got me better, but it got me to a point. I didn't, I did those to get better, to bounce back and learn, but it didn't consume me.
Right.
So
the following events, things that happened afterward. You're
right.
talking about your dad passing away,
right.
and that obviously that's extremely traumatic for anybody, especially when you're close. And like you said, you had a little bit of guilt in that relationship because you were always gone. And but you, because of the experience earlier with your divorce, right? You learned how to build those resilience, the resilience and the self-care tools. And so the time period that it took for you to kind of recover from that was way shorter.
Quicker. Yeah. And I think the key word is tools. They're tools. They're not a chain. They're not a safety net that you hold on to constantly. They're tools to build.
Good. That's a great point. It's such a great point.
And you build what you got to build, and then you press forward. Right. And then if you have to use it again, you build. But you need to stick with it, because honestly, I was like, I know you're going to joke, but I don't eat and I don't exercise. And, but I also know that that's I do feel bad a lot of times, I ache and, and I hurt and those type of things. And I, was telling Mary, I said, well, we're going to have to start something, walking, something. So, that's in our future, and it's just, you got to come to a point where you're like, I'm tired of feeling this way.
That's exactly where I was going to go with this, right? Is I think, in this discussion, like many of the other discussions when we talk about leadership, as individuals, we need to recognize that as either a strength or a weakness, right? We need to be able to say, hey, I'm just not good at this, right? How do I get myself better? PDGU running, we talked about PDGU was, we got to be, getting uncomfortable. Right? And that's part of this combination, I believe, is we got to get really uncomfortable with this and say, hey, I'm just not good at it, but I want to be better and I'm going to be better. And then you go out and kind of work on this skill set. And just like anything else, regardless of where you start, your innate ability to do this, some of us have it, some of us don't. Right. I think we can all learn.
Right. It is learnable. Grow. Yes.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. 100%. This is such a paralyzing topic, when we talk about it. I always think about, use your example with your divorce, but I think back through our lives, and we had, some pretty traumatic times. We were told our daughter was going to be born with spina bifida, and Donna had stage 3 cancer. And, there was a lot of times where it got really stressful, but the biggest one for us is we had just a really significant financial issues pop up. A lot of it wasn't really in our control. I mean, we only lived in a house for like 5 months, and then Donna's dad got stage 4 throat cancer, and we ended up doing a humanitarian moved back to Florida. And it was the first house we'd ever bought, and we'd only lived 5 months, and we moved out of it, and we were trying to rent it to somebody else. And of course the housing market crashed and they destroyed the house. And then I had co-signed on a loan for my mom on her house to do some construction because the hurricanes had, destroyed her home, and she was a massive alcoholic and had very little income. So I co-signed the loan for her. She was making the payments. Well, then, about 2 weeks after I got back to the States on the humanitarian assignment for Donna's dad that had throat cancer, she passed away and left me that loan. So now I co-signed that loan. Now I got to pay that. And then, Donna's dad, he was the only breadwinner in that family. Nobody else had an income. So we were actually helping them pay their mortgage. So I was paying our rent in our new place. I was helping them pay their mortgage. I was paying my mom's loan. And when the people in Alaska destroyed the house and stopped paying, I was paying, a fourth mortgage payment up there. And to your point about, hey, I'm tired of living like this. I'm not kidding you. I was at work one day and I told you this was the only time in my career where I think my mental health impacted my duty performance. Like truly. And I mean, of course, we're not always on our A game. Nobody is, right? But I mean, for more than, a couple hours or a couple days, it had gone on for weeks, and I just did the bare minimum to get by, right? And I remember that same moment. I went into the security manager's office. I said, "Hey, if I file bankruptcy, am I going to get kicked out of there?" He said, "Depends on the circumstances." And I didn't even ask what those circumstances were. I went, "That's what I'm doing." And I don't care if it ends up ending my career. I'm okay with it because the stress was so intense that I had to do something.
Right.
Like I was willing to deal with the consequences of getting out of the Air Force. I'll go find a job. We'll do something, right? We can make it work. But I couldn't deal with the extreme intense stress from this financial situation. So that's what I did. We went home. I called a lawyer. The guy, I'm not kidding you. It was like the weight of the world was lifted off of me when I called the lawyer, because he said, "Here's my number. If anybody calls you, you just give them to me. Stop paying everything." And I went, "What? Stop paying everything?" He said, "Stop paying everything. Your car payment's nothing. Don't pay it." And I'm not advocating that that's right, of course, but I'm just saying in the moment, right? All of that stress that we had just is gone instantly. And because of all that stress, our marriage was falling apart, right? My relationship with the kids was kind of strange because we just, there was so much stress in the house. Nothing was good, and all of a sudden, all of those things started to get better, and we did. We ended up filing bankruptcy, and I obviously didn't lose my career over it because of the circumstances. They understood what was going on, and I even kept my security clearance. I had a TS and never lost my TS. We had to deal with the consequences of a bankruptcy for 7 years or so with our credit, but man, it was such a significant moment. Just making that one decision to do something. Even though, understanding the ramifications and the risks of that, it was just so freeing to be able to do that. And honestly, to your point, you lost your dad after the fact. I lost my mom. Like I said, 2 weeks after, we got back. There was so many other kind of life circumstances. And because of that, I agree. I built up some kind of skill set to be able to manage, be able to manage it.
That's the important thing. I think, whenever, especially in our times now, and I look at my kids and I sheltered them. I feel I sheltered them too much. And so we're on the road to trying to recover from that, to show them and to help them use the tools available to build up their own ability to have resilience, because I sure don't want them to be able to go into something and not have the ability to rebound, because of my choice to shield them from the things that I went through. So, I sent them to Seattle, and I told them my in-laws, please work them to death, not to death, but please work them, make them feel what it's like to have to sustain yourself, and I've really been struggling with that. And so I thought that's why I kind of wanted to chat about this. And I think it's important for, business. I think it's important for military folks. I think it's important for just individuals. We have to be able to learn. We have to be able to use the tools given to us to become resilient, because it doesn't get easier. Things aren't getting easier in the world right now. Things are getting tougher. We're dealing with viruses and the changing economies and the cyber. I think, and unfortunately, I hate to say it, but I think that even though we're going to ask you to watch this on social media stuff, the
social dilemma.
The little phones that we use, and we're just sucked in. We're not living. And I think that's an important thing. We need to really start to kind of figure out how to live again.
We talked about this too, and I've said this in the past to a lot of people, but I think sometimes I worry about, if you continually lower the standard, then you continually will lower resilience, right? There's a balance somewhere in that, right? You can't make it too hard, and then it's defeating itself, right? Nobody gets it, and so you're constantly telling somebody they're not good enough. But But at the same time, I don't think you can always lower the hurdle, right? I think you have to fall, right? You have to get uncomfortable. You have to experience failure.
Yeah.
You have to be okay with it.
Yeah.
You have to, of course, you're going to stress about it. You're going to have these things in your life. But again, I think we can't just lower the standard. I used to use this at ALS or NCO Academy, or when I go do my presentations when I was a command chief. And I saw somebody else do it years before, and I don't remember who it was, but it's such a great example. But I used to take a stick or a broomstick or something into the classroom, and I used to tell I'd set it maybe 6 inches off the ground or 4 inches off the ground, and I would ask the folks, hey, come. I'd ask 5 people to come up and jump over the stick. Hey, come over and jump over the stick. And inevitably, 100% of the time, people would jump. If it was 6 inches, they'd jump 8 inches to get over the stick.
Yeah.
Every single time. Nobody got to the stick and jumped as high as they could to get over the stick.
Yeah.
Why? Well, because it's in our nature, right? To just
do what
it's energy conservation. It's in our nature. It's kind of like the fight or flight. It's in our nature. It's in our nature to conserve energy. And those who are, extremely committed and work real hard, right? Those go-getters out there, they've learned to channel that so that virtue, in a sense, when they have the stick, they jump as high as they can to get over the stick.
Yeah.
Right. But every time we lower the stick, then people will jump lower and jump lower and jump lower. Right. And I don't know, then the next time they face the stick that's really high, they don't not really sure how to deal with it.
Can we jump that high?
Right. There's a lot of negative thought that happens. Right. And then especially if they fail like you do. And because you haven't practiced jumping over that, you're probably not going to be good at jumping over the stick. Right. So I really worry. And this is not just, I'm not just talking about Air Force. I'm talking about corporate America. I'm talking about in our families, our personal lives, right? Which is why we always talk about if you're not growing, you're not going, right? Not getting uncomfortable, then you're probably not raising the bar, and you're probably not getting better at, managing and dealing with these things. So, one of the ways I would say, part of the reason why we are here today is because both of us agree that we needed to do something to take us out of our comfort zone.
Yeah, exactly.
That we needed to do something that was going to help us grow. And we thought, hey, let's do this podcast. As a matter of fact, you just showed up one day and we just said, enough procrastination.
Let's do it.
Let's get upstairs, pick a freaking topic, and we're going, right? And enough. There's no more excuses, right? And if we fall flat on our face, so what?
Yeah.
And we're going to keep doing it. And it was kind of brutal in the beginning.
Yeah.
Right. What they didn't see is the few that we did that never made it live. Right. We're not putting that one out. Right. But, we get a little better and a little better at it every single time, and whether it's our preparation or the screen, the equipment that we use, our dialogue and communication, the topics, we get a little better. So, I just, we have to really be careful about lowering standards. I think it's exactly what you talked about with your kids, right? You lower the standard because you don't want them. You want to try and shelter them from the difficulties of these things. But the problem is now when they get out into life, nobody's lowering the standard.
Right. It was, that's what the problem sometimes I think is, it was good intention, but not necessarily going to bring out the best results.
Yeah.
While there was good intentions for me because of the experience that I've had, I look back now, I'm looking right now and my eyes are open saying, he's just my son's a few years from being able to leave on his own. And did I prepare him enough?
Right.
And I think that you can look at it in corporate world or in the military, looking at the next rank or the next promotion, are you being prepared enough?
Right.
Are you keep lowering that standards to make people feel good?
Yeah.
And are we allowing feelings to override anything that we can think of, or are we actually building people who are able to accomplish the mission and be resilient, bounce backs from work stress or money stress or something that allows them to become better.
Right.
Because I think that when you do go through something and you do acquire the resilience, I believe also it's important that we turn around and we share our experiences.
Yeah,
I teach divorce care at my church, because I went through such a bitter divorce. So, I think that you learn and then you you give.
Back.
You got to give back. So,
PDGU.
Yep.
Give. That's the G in PDGU.
Yep.
That's good stuff, man. We could talk about this for probably another 4 hours at least, but we're not, because we got to let these folks go. But I really appreciate that, man. That was really good. And if you guys have any questions or comments, please let us know. This is really good dialogue. And we would encourage you to have this same dialogue with your folks.
Yeah.
Right. Sit down with them and see what they think about this whole conversation, resilience versus self-care. I think you'll get a way better understanding of where they are and what things you need to establish in your culture and in your family or in your professional environments. But this is a must-have conversation, I believe, which is why we're here today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.
Good stuff, man.
Absolutely. So until next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Right,
appreciate you. That was Leadership Labs. See ya. What's ever? Okay. Man, I've had that all day today.
Right.
I think I need self-care.
Self-care.
That's a blooper.
Yeah. Self-care with a bottle of liquor.
Putting that in the bloopers. All right, one more time.